Good morning. In today's session, we are going to look at the joints of the shoulder girdle. This comes under the competency AN 13.4, namely describe the sternoclavicular and acromioclavicular joint. You may wonder why I started with shoulder girdle and just these two joints are mentioned. Does it mean that only these two joints are part of girdle? No. Actually, pectoral girdle or the shoulder girdle is the one which connects the bones of the upper limb with axial skeleton. What is axial skeleton? The sternum, the vertebrae, the pubic bone, all those which are in the center portion including the skull, they all belong to the axial skeleton. And for upper limb, we know that the bones of humerus, radius, ulna and the bones of the hand, they all are part of the upper limb. So, it is the part that connects the bones of the upper limb to the axial skeleton is what we call as girdle, pectoral girdle. Why do we need this pectoral girdle? Otherwise, this movement, which is the hallmark feature of human beings, where we use our upper limb so very widely that we need this away. We call it as together but away. So, it has to be connected to the skeleton, axial skeleton. At the same time, it should be away to enable the maximum movements. So, for that, there are an additional bones, which are the clavicle and scapula, which are present in the trunk, in the upper region, but which are not available in the lower region, where the lower bone, the lower limb bone, the femur, is directly connected to the axial skeleton. Whereas in upper limb, there is a gap which is filled by the clavicle and the scapula, which connect the upper limb to the axial skeleton, thereby giving us lot of mobility and dexterous action, which is the hallmark feature of the human beings. What is a girdle? A girdle is a belt or a cord which encircles, and that's what is a literal English meaning. So here the pectoral girdle sort of encircles by, if you see the scapula and the clavicular position, they encircle the axial skeleton and the upper limb. So that is why this is called as pectoral girdle. In addition to the joints that we are going to see today, namely the acromioclavicular and the sternoclavicular joint, we also have one other joint, the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint, which also is part of the shoulder girdle. Because it's a big topic and an important topic by itself, it has been dealt in a separate session. So, in this session, we will be looking at the acromioclavicular joint and the sternoclavicular joint. Before we start the session, let us just have a small case discussion for you. A 17-year-old boy comes to the emergency room after a hard fall onto the lateral aspect of his left shoulder during a basketball game. He complains of generalized pain during the movement, shoulder motion. On physical examination, the clavicle is prominent. The distal end of the clavicle is prominent and distinctly palpable. And an X-ray finding shows a grade 3 shoulder separation. So, with this picture of the following features which are enumerated below, which do you think you will see in this condition? There are 4 choices given. I am not going to read out those 4 choices. For those of you who are already aware of this topic, can try your answer. Fine. So, whether your answer is right or wrong, we will see in the end of the session. As I just told you, there are 3 joints in the shoulder complex, namely the sternoclavicular, acromioclavicular. So, as I just mentioned, there are 3 joints in the shoulder complex, namely the sternoclavicular, acromioclavicular and the glenohumeral joints, of which the glenohumeral joint is a separate topic by itself. We will be able to see this is the region of the acromioclavicular joint, where the acromion process and the clavicle are united. This is the region of the sternoclavicular joint. So, you can see that the sternum is connected to the clavicle by the sternoclavicular joint. The clavicle is in turn connected to the acromion process of the scapula, and the rest of the scapula is connected to the humerus by way of the glenoid fossa. So, in this way, these 3 joints, this is the area of shoulder joint. So, these 3 joints ensure that the upper limb is connected to the axial skeleton. What is sternoclavicular joint? It's very simple. The name itself says it's an articulation between the sternum and the clavicle. Which part of the sternum? We know that the sternum has the manubrium. In the manubrium, there is a clavicular knot. So, it is the clavicular notch of the manubrium, the sternum, and the adjoining area where the first costal cartilage articulates. So, this is the area of articulation for the sternal end of the sternoclavicular joint. With regards to the clavicle, it is the clavicle end, the sternal end of the clavicle. So, these two are the articular surfaces for the sternoclavicular joint, and it is a saddle type of synovial joint. So, where there is a minimal activity, minimal movement, that is why it is synovial. At the same time, not too much of a movement also. So, if you see here in this picture, there is something here, which is a fibrocartilaginous disc. This fibrocartilaginous disc is present within the joint cavity, thereby separating the joint cavity into two parts, one superior, one inferior. This is laterally placed, this is medially placed. So, infero-medial and supero-lateral compartment. So, we will see about it in detail subsequent slide.